Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of This Week in Christian History. We are glad to have Dr. Jennifer Woodruff Tait on with us, who is the senior editor of Christian History Magazine. We have enjoyed our partnership and working together with the Christian History Institute, which is the mothership, if you will, of Christian History Magazine. And we're so glad to have you on yet again to be a part of what we're doing with the Center for Christian History.
Well, I'm very glad to be here.
Well, today's subject, because as some of our followers may or may not have recalled, we do our Christian History Chronicles each month, and we do a deep dive on a particular subject. And previously, if you go back to our website, you will be able to see some conversation that Dr. Woodruff Tait and I had on the temperance movement in the United States. And so now I twisted her arm a little bit more and asked if she wouldn't mind coming on and talking about the date that we are focusing on, which is actually the ordination of Absalom Jones, who was the very first African American to be ordained into the Episcopal Church on October 16th, 1795 is the date. And we're getting a little extra bonus into that because when we talk about Bishop Jones, we also need to be able to talk about Richard Allen, who was a compatriot of sorts as well. So how about I stop talking and you stop talking, Dr.
Yeah,
That'd be a lot better.
it's easy to get confused because they were very much partners, but Richard Allen's actually the bishop. But let me back up and tell the
Please do.
the story here. So Absalom Jones and Richard Allen were friends. They were both people. Absalom Jones was about 15 years earlier. Actually, I had to look that up. 15 years older. They were both born into slavery and then bought their freedom when they became adults. And both of them joined St. George's Methodist Episcopal Church, which was Old St. George's, like one of the mother churches of Methodism in America. That was where they met. They didn't know each other before that.
Okay.
And they were both, as you can tell from their later, active people, very interested in ministry, very interested in evangelizing the Black community, of other freed slaves who would come and become a part of what was going on at St. George's, and so it worked. They were both good evangelists, and they grew the congregation, which is supposed to be good, right?
Right.
Well, I don't know if you ever heard of something called the 7% rule, which is a sociological concept that whenever you get more than 7% of any minority in a majority space, the majority will feel that they have been taken over. It's that low. So,
wow.
And I've actually experienced this myself in churches in the South that were majority white, where there was one Black family and everyone said, "Oh, we love this family," and then they started evangelizing, more people started coming, and then people like, "Oh, no," Anyway, that's exactly what happened at St. George's.
Okay.
It's unfortunate that happened in the 20th century. It was unfortunate that it happened, in the 18th century. There were so many Black members that the white members said, we can't all keep sitting together. We're going to make the Black members sit in the balcony. And so
this is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, right?
This is not Pennsylvania.
This is not, Jackson, Mississippi, right? I mean,
just because slavery began to become illegal in the North, during this period, does not, and I mean, both Allen and Jones were legally enslaved in the North. So at the point they were born, it had not yet become illegal, but you do see those laws starting to fall in the North. But that didn't mean that white Christians that wanted to associate with Black Christians, even though both Jones and Allen were free. And this other, and I don't actually know exactly how many it was, but there was a group of people, very devout people who would come and become Methodists, join the church, who were African American. And the story, the way it's told, is that actually happened during a Sunday service. That Jones and Allen and their friends went up to pray at the altar rail, which is a time-honored Protestant tradition, right? You can go pray at the altar rail.
Sure.
And the ushers told them all to go sit in the balcony, and that they were not welcome on the ground floor. And so both of them left the church, and they founded. They and these people that they had evangelized and brought into the congregation left with them, and they founded. Excuse me. They founded their own church called the African Church, and they also founded a group called the Free African Society, and that was a group of Black Christians and others who would meet, and their idea was to help people who were in need. So they paid dues, and so they collected the dues, kind of like Christian insurance health insurance companies. They all paid in, and then if somebody was in need, they would have money to help them. This became incredibly important because shortly after they founded it, there was a yellow fever epidemic in Philadelphia, and so they cared for a number of people in need. The society actually came first, but sort of out of all of this came this church. And that's the part of the story that goes together. At some point, Jones and some of these other Black Christians decided that they sort of had the brightest future in the Protestant Episcopal Church, which that was the original official name, the Protestant Episcopal Church in the United States of America. Very long, but they it's like we have bishops, but we're Protestant. Don't worry. So anyway, so Absalom Jones took a bunch of the people, and they basically joined as a parish, as the first Black parish in the Episcopal Church. And Absalom Jones was then ordained by William White, who was the Episcopal bishop, and he was the first Black priest in the.
So he was a priest, or he was not the bishop.
He was not the bishop. The bishop part is because the story sort of was confused. So what happened to Richard Allen? Richard Allen was not as liturgical. I'm saying this because he says it himself in his autobiography. He says he thought that he liked the plain preaching of the Methodists, and he said he wanted to remain a Methodist. Well, he wasn't going back to St. George's,
right?
And this church Jones had founded together had sort of been received, en masse into the Episcopal Church. So he started his own denomination and was the first bishop of it. And the church that he founded, which still exists and is very, very active church, it was the African Methodist Episcopal Church. So everything about it, the doctrine, the discipline, we have the Methodist Episcopal Church, now we have the African Methodist Episcopal Church. He's like, we are Methodists, we do things the Methodist way, but we're doing this, because we have been cast out, of the white church. We are going to do this, we're going to do this for African American people who want to have Methodist preaching and Methodist doctrine. And so, out of this one, sort of terrible act of these people being, so, badly treated by St. George's, you get, the beginning of ministry to African American, to and with and by African Americans in the Episcopal Church. And you also get the founding of a whole denomination from these two people that were friends, and they stayed friends. And they worked together, and they worked together with the Black community in Pennsylvania. So it wasn't like they never talked to each other. They disagreed on this one religious question, but they didn't stop talking to each other. And I got to look at my dates here to see which of them died first. Jones died in 1818, and Richard Allen lived on until 1831. And by that point, the African Methodist Episcopal Church, which normally, so we don't have to say that long thing, people refer to as the AME.
Right. Well, there's plenty of AME churches all around, right? I mean, so it's,
So later there were two other Methodist, primarily Black Methodist denominations founded, which is not necessarily what I came on to talk about, but you may have heard of the AME Zion and the CME, and those came out of other events in Methodism. But if we stick close to Allen and Jones,
sure,
he's a founder of the AME, and I've actually been to the church, the church he founded, and they actually have they're properly enclosed in a coffin and all that, but they actually have the bodies of him and his second wife. His first wife died. The second wife was sort of considered to be the mother of African Episcopal Methodism, and they're both buried in the basement of the church.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That sounds like some, churches in England and right and other places like that you can
Yeah.
go down below and find the pastor and find a few more folks down underneath the church, right?
Yeah, I wrote an article once for the journal, the academic journal Methodist History, that was all about Methodist relationship to relics. And I was like, you Methodists are like, oh, we don't have relics, we don't have saints. And then, and then I used to work at Drew University where we had George Whitfield's thumb, which is a whole other story. And then it's like, and here's some other Church of African Methodism, and Richard and Sarah Allen are buried in the basement. So anyway.
Hey, we are enjoying our conversation with Dr. Jennifer Woodruff Tait, who is the senior editor of Christian History Magazine, and we're talking about Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and their pioneering efforts, and particularly in America in the late 1700s, about establishing churches in and around Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So their division, was it doctrinal or theological and as the core, or was it more church polity and kind of how we operate?
Yeah, so I have to admit I have not read a lot of Absalom Jones. If he wrote on this subject, I've read it, but I've read Richard Allen's autobiography, and at least for him, it seems to have been liturgical.
Okay.
He did not, which and I, by saying that, African Methodist Episcopal worship, if you go to church, is still, what a lot of people consider fairly high. They took over a lot of the early Methodist forms of worship, which was not all, frontier stuff. But he was not as enamored, interested in the what went, the sort of higher, as you would have seen it, Protestant Episcopal forms of liturgy. According to Allen, that was his main reason for breaking, because it was Jones and a lot of the other people, and Allen's main reason for breaking with them seems to have been primarily liturgical.
I got you. Okay. Well, I remember when my daughter was in like the fourth or fifth grade, they all had, little history stories that they had to read for social studies. And one of them was all about Absalom Jones' efforts with the yellow fever epidemic.
Right.
And I mean, so this was really salt and light stuff, right? I mean, he was like taking care, wasn't just for his church parishioners, it was people throughout the city, right?
Yeah, it reminds me of the stories of the early Christians where, when there was plague and and unrest, in the Roman Empire, and people were like, and the sort of going pagan thing was to, you help the people, you help your patron, you help your clients, that kind of thing, and they're like, the Christians are helping everybody. Why are they doing that? It was a really similar kind of witness. Where they were trying to, we need to do whatever we need to do to care for the sick and deal with this terrible epidemic.
Yeah, and so he was very much involved in all the rest of that to be able to do. So, do you happen to know? And this is I just am clueless, but did that St. George's Church keep going? Is it still an active?
Oh, it is. It didn't keep going. It is still very there.
Okay.
If you go, they have a museum attached to it now as well, a museum of early Methodism. So, if you go, you can see, So no, it continued on, and is still very prominent. So
yeah, interesting to be able to do. So we just so to get me clarified again, right? So we understand that Absalom Jones that we're focusing on for our deep dive this week of August the 16th. This was his ordination as a priest
which actually happened a little bit later than everything I'm talking about. So he was, when they took the church into the African Church, which became the Episcopal Church of St. Thomas. When they took it, he said, I want my whole church to be received, and he was ordained a deacon almost immediately.
Okay.
But then it was, I gotta look at my notes here, 7 years later that he was ordained a priest on the date we're celebrating, in 1802. He was 56. So that's a long ordination process.
Yeah, really, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so I wonder how long it was before other people of African descent were actually also ordained? I mean, did you have to be a superstar? This is pontificating, right? But I mean, I wonder if you had to be a superstar
That's
like
actually a
Absalom
really good.
Jones. But
Actually a really good question that I should know the answer to and don't. I could look it up, but
oh
not,
well,
not what
right.
we're talking. There's certainly, I do know what I do know as a tradition of Black Episcopalianism developed. And there were churches, and that maybe it wasn't legal segregation, but there were, it was like, okay, there was the Black church and there was the white church, but there were a number of these churches that were founded, and throughout the 19th century and established with Black leadership, in both, because in both, it wasn't like there were no African Americans now in the Methodist Church either. The thing just happened in Philadelphia. In both cases, as and then when we get to the point after the Civil War, there was a real hesitation of having Black people take any kind of leadership over white congregations or white groups. And so when you begin to get Black bishops ordained, they often get sent off to be bishops in Africa. Because it's like, okay, now that this person is called and qualified to be bishop, but we
Not here.
we don't want him here, so we're gonna send him overseas.
We feel good about ourselves as long as you go do it over there. We don't want you to do
Yeah,
it.
yeah,
Right.
but I actually do not know, and I'm going to find this out. For the second, how long we waited for the second and the third. But like I said, I do know that there became a very strong tradition of certain churches that were Black Episcopal churches, that were very strong churches. So.
Well, and that's part of why we're able to make a really clear connect between Allen and Jones as well, is that but for them both having, I guess, to have left St. George's at the same time, and even though on this liturgical piece that they had some arm wrestle over, if you will, about kind of the way to do it, even though they remained friends. From all of that, we get this whole denomination that is still very active in the church today, right? About having the AME church. So
Yeah.
understanding, you really never know how God's providence is going to work out, right? I mean, which way?
I want to sort of be clear and say, what the people at St. George's did was wrong.
Right.
This is a case of, you don't do evil that good may come,
Right.
but when evil happens, God is still able to work with that.
Right.
And the gospel began to be preached in a different way because of what these guys did after they were sinned against,
Yes. Yes. What a fascinating time, right? I mean, to be able to, I wonder if this could have taken place in some other place other than colonial America, right? Or just barely minted the United States of America.
Yeah, I mean, every country's history with this kind of thing is different, so it's really hard to say.
Yeah, how interesting to be able to do. Well, fantastic ideas and great. Thank you for taking some time to talk with us today and helping us learn a little bit more about this part of Christian history. Thank you as well for the good work that goes on with the Christian History Magazine. Tell us how people can find Christian History Magazine and how they can be able to tap into it, literally.
Yeah. So all our back issues are on the web. I think, I don't know if people say on the web anymore. I'm getting older, but anyway, they're online.
And they're free.
Yeah, and they're free.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Which is important to say because some of the issues, the ones that were published, what was it, Christianity Today, are also on their site, and they're not free.
Okay.
But part of the agreement when it came back to Christian History Institute was that we would get to put them all online for free. So they are, from issue 1 to the one that just on the Mercersburg movement that just came out like last week. And everything from 2011-ish on, when the magazine, like, it started by Christian History Institute, then it was at Christianity Today, then it came back. So everything since it came back, which is like 15 years now, is in full color. And you can flip through it, just like you were, there's
Right.
PDFs and this software called Issue where you can just flip through it as if you
Yeah.
had it, in front, if you had the paper in front of you. But we also like it when people subscribe to the paper, and those get mailed out 4 times a year. And all of the information, you can read anything online, but if you want, to have a hard copy, and many people save them and have them all since the beginning, and in slipcases. You can't see it because I got the blur on, but I got that behind me as well. Anyway, you can buy back issues. Some of them are out of stock, but most of them are available. And you can and you can read and you can, subscribe and donate and do all those things at the website, which I'm not sure I mentioned. The title of it is christianhistoryinstitute.org.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to make sure you did. I was going to do it if you didn't. Okay. I mean,
yeah, I got launched in that sense, and I'm like, I don't think I ever told people what the link is. So Christian History Institute, if you Google, look that up, you'll find everything, that you need to know. And there's some other resources that aren't necessarily, there's the magazine, but there's also like teaching modules, sort of like a short course in church history. There's a list of every pope ever. There's a couple other, sort of random interesting things. So
right. But no, it's a fantastic resource, and we enjoy our working relationship from our Center for Christian History as being the little brother to the big brother that is CHI. So we're glad to at least try to be in the same space some of the same time to do. So, Dr. Jennifer Woodruff Tait, thank you so much for your time today and helping us learn even more about Christian history.
I'm glad to be here.